how do we become the rivers of the world rather than the reservoirs of the world? And I think the common element is gratitude. When you are in gratitude, you're not arriving, you're always giving, you're always attracting. And I think life's a lot better if we're attracting rather than chasing.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sparks of Gratitude podcast. We have an awesome guest today, Lee Brower. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you, Randy. Excited to be here.
And I expect what we have today, people, is the Gratitude Ninja, and you will see why. when I talk about gratitude, and I've thought about bringing this podcast and interviewing people and just sharing good principles and good experiences, all revolving around the principle of gratitude. Lee was one of the first that came to mind because I thought, yeah, this is a guy who has really spent the time, put in the effort, and now is sharing this with other people to make their lives and legacies better. So Lee, this is going to be fun for me.
I think it's going to be fun for both of us.
Well, excellent. So could you maybe give us a little background of who you are?
Well, thank you. First of all, I'm a father and a husband. I have 8 wonderful children. We have 7 living. We lost a son to cancer when he was 22, and then we have 19 grandchildren. So that pretty much keeps me going. However, as much as that is, I'm very, very blessed to be involved in really what as people say, what do? I say I build bridges. And they build bridges. And I said, yes, I build bridges that connect the very best of people with their highest and best future. And there's a lot to that. My background, Randy, came from, I was in the financial services industry, focused on estate planning, and worked with a firm in Los Angeles. They had little clients like the Lyndon B. Johnson family, Dean Martin. I was like the kid in the candy store, and so I could say I had them as clients, but what that really means is I carried the files in the room. But it gave me a deep passion of how does money move from one generation to the next. And so I started working down that career and became what the world would consider to be financially successful. However, along that path, I started, there was a statistic that just kept gnawing at me, and that was 97% of all family wealth rarely survives the 3rd generation. And I'm like, why am I doing this? I mean, we're doing all this work. We create trust. We do the financial work. And what we were really doing was preparing the money for the children. But what it took me to realize, we weren't preparing the children for the money. And when you started to look at that aspect of it, I started saying, why am I doing this? If this is an indictment on the industry, if only 3% of family wealth moves from one generation to the next, why am I doing this? And I actually reached a point where I said, what profession could I get into where I can make a difference like this? And I went back and took some classes. I decided I'm an ER doctor. And here
That's
I am.
quite a swing.
Have the business over
From
here.
one side to another.
I know. Well, I felt a need to really be able to do something that I could feel like I was making an impact. Along that way, as we started really evaluating it and looking at things, I started really looking at saying, wait a second, you've been doing this. How can you do this to make it even better? How do you do this so that it starts to impact people? So the event happened, my turning point for me was I was in the shower, and this idea came to me, and I jumped out and started writing it down. And a couple of hours later, I'm on an airplane flying to Atlanta. And this was my pivot. I mean, this is a point where everything just really kind of changed. And I was sitting next to a lady, and she says, what do you do? And I said, well, I started talking, but actually what happened was she started telling me everything that she did first. And so I listened. He says, oh, by the way, what do you do? And I took out a piece of paper based upon the thoughts I'd had that morning. And I drew a little quadrant, if you will, on it. And I wrote on the top of it, said, well, I optimize wealth. And she goes, well, what does that mean? And I said, well, when you hear the word wealth, what do you think of? And she said, well, money, real estate, and started listing a whole bunch of things. I said, so what you're talking about are things. And she goes, yes. And I said, well, do you have assets that you value more than your things? And she says, you mean like my family? I said, well, would you trade your family for more money? No. What else? And so she started thinking about it. And she said, well, my health. I wouldn't trade my health for more money. I said, okay, good. What my values, the things that I believe in, my talents. And so I was filling all these other things in that box. And I said, well, what about your education and your experiences? And she said, well, I learned more from my bad experiences than I do my good experiences. And so I wrote experiences and relationships and reputation. And then we talked about in terms of, would you want to be somebody that when you left this planet, when you left it, you knew that you created more than you consumed, or you consumed more than you created? And she says, well, no. And I want my children, to be able to have that mindset that they create more than they consume. And I had 4 boxes on this quadrant. One was with the financial, one was with what was character, the core, the things that you value most. One was your experiences in life. And the fourth one was the concept of being able to create more than you consume, and contribution. So I said, when you look at these 4 boxes, which ones of these boxes would you like your children to inherit from you? She said, all of them. I'd like them to benefit from our financial wealth. I want them to have good values where they put family and their faith first, and they put that over what they're doing, and and their health. And I really want them to have great experiences, great reputation on their own, build on their own learning, their education, and stand on our shoulders maybe on that. And then fourthly, I want them to create more than they consume. And I said, well, what if you couldn't give them all 4? What if you could only give them 3? Which one would you leave behind? And she said, it didn't take her but a second. She took her finger and put it right on right in that southwest corner, said financial. I said, now, why did you say that? She said, well, I know this, that if my children were bankrupt here, pointing to the health and family and what we call the core or the character, or they were bankrupt here in their experience and the learning, or they were bankrupt here in their contribution, financial is going to go away. But if they're rich here, she points to their belief in God, their faith, their health, their family, and they're rich here in their experiences, their reputation, their networks, their alliances, their skills, and they're rich here in that they're contributing more than they're consuming. This is going to take care of itself. Now, see where my background was coming. That was like, boom.
It's the whole thing is upside down. You flipped it up.
Exactly. And I asked her, I said, have you ever done estate planning? And she goes, yes, several times. I said, several times? She says, yes, several times. And where did you and your advisors focus? And she took her finger and put it right there on the financial. Changed me completely. So then we started moving into a different way of thinking. In fact, in one day, I walked away from that industry and said, there's more that I can do. And then from that point on, I chose to work with entrepreneurs because of their influence. And so that became kind of a point. And because of the relationships that I already had with certain clients and working in the entrepreneurial area, so we started working with entrepreneurial families and businesses in that area, but looking at it from a completely different perspective.
And you say in one day you walked away from it.
One day. I went from a significant income to zero in one day.
And tell me about the feelings and emotions you had in that one day. Was that an easy decision? Was that a challenging decision?
The decision was easy. The process was difficult. In other words, it became even easier when I explained it to my wife, and bless her heart, she was all in on it, and she's been all in from day one. And we started really realizing, and in that moment, our whole family changed. I mean, everything changed in the family. And let me put it this way. I hesitate to use the word change, so I'm going to use the word improve. So our whole family improved, and we became, and I'm going to add a 4-letter word to this too, and we became even better. Because when we say we became better, it kind of implies maybe we weren't, you know what I mean? But we became even better as a family as we started to develop traditions, quite frankly, that centered around gratitude and the aspects of gratitude. If I could say in one word, why doesn't wealth move from one generation to the next generation? It's lack of gratitude. That feeling of appreciation that you can get from the family that you're in and what you're doing. And it's the opposite of entitlement. Let's just put it that way.
So talk a little bit more about that, of why that's so important. What have you seen in that? Why gratitude is that factor?
Well, let me share it this way for a second. Okay. When I look at I call it phases of wealth, but it actually opens up to so much more than that. I think that when you look at, I don't know, where I grew up, it was a big deal to cruise Maine on the weekend. You know what I mean? I don't know why. Small town, we didn't have much to do. Get in the car. We'd drive from the Safeway to the Dairy Queen and turn around and drive back to the Safeway and back and forth. And that's the way that weekends happen for us.
Well, if everybody's doing it, that's where it's all happening.
I guess, But then people continue to live their life that way. And this is not a bad thing. This is a good thing. This is the salt of the earth. Very predictable. They get up in the morning, they go through a routine, they go to work, they come home from that routine. Maybe they go coach their kids' athletic events, or maybe they go watch in some of their artistic events and dance and all the different things that they're involved with their kids. And then they come back and they have dinner, they watch their favorite show on TV, and they rinse and repeat. So it's Dairy Queen, Safeway, Dairy King, Safeway. But that provides stability. It provides a foundation. So that's what I call the cruisers, okay? That you can just tell where they're at and where they're going. But then there's those that want to go past the Dairy Queen, past the Safeway, and I call those strivers. So they're striving to get out of it. The risk with strivers is they're always, not always, the risk for strivers is that frequently they're looking for the get rich quick. How do I get from here to here? And then, and then they see this over there, and and then they see this over here, instead of staying with it. Those that stay with it, then they reach a stage of so we're going through strivers, then they reach a stage called drivers. And so the drivers, they've found something to drive. They got an occupation that gives them a sense of joy that they can grow and expand in. Maybe they become their own boss, an entrepreneur, whatever it may be, but they're now driving and they feel good about it. The enemy of driving is arriving. And so you arrive, and then if you have nothing more, whether you retire, or maybe if you're a businessman, you sell your business, or you're a third generation that was born on third base and you actually believe you hit a triple, and you arrive right out the gate, in terms of your mindset. And if you have that mindset, like I've arrived, you don't have that thing to aspire towards, then you dive. So we've got strivers, drivers, arrivers, and divers. Okay. And that sequence follows itself. That's how you get to the third generation or fourth generation without having that growth. So I started looking at it. That happens with everybody to a certain degree, this arriving. I'm going to arrive when I get this. I'm going to arrive when I get that. And what if you lived a life where there were no finish lines? What if you lived a life where you just said no? Maybe there's, instead of finish lines or instead of goals, maybe there's stepping stones or milestones. So you're always staying in motion. And so with that mindset is what I call the thrivers. Okay, so they thrive. And so they bypass that arriving. So the arriving mindset is more of what I call a reservoir mindset, where they're always focused with what I call arrows in. How much water can I get in my reservoir? How much shoreline can I get in my reservoir? How many fish? Well, how do you get fish in a reservoir, by the way? You buy them, okay? So if I buy big enough fish, I'll get more people to fish in my reservoir. And then, how do you look at that guy's boat? Oh, I want a boat just like that. But when you get it, then what? You've arrived. And then you're frustrated. You're not growing. You're not accomplishing. So contrast the reservoir mindset with a river mindset. A river is interested in flow. Flow attracts. It attracts tributaries. Flow attracts wildlife to its shores. It attracts spawning beds naturally. Flora, all kinds of life. At the same time, it's giving because it irrigates pastures, it irrigates crops, it creates electricity. And so this is the mindset that I think is the gratitude mindset, the thriving. If you take thrivers, and you take the E out of it, I mean, if you take the rivers, you take the E out of it spells thrivers. And so that fits in nicely with my thinking. So really, how do we become the rivers of the world rather than the reservoirs of the world? And I think the common element is gratitude. When you are in gratitude, you're not arriving, you're always giving, you're always attracting. And I think life's a lot better if we're attracting rather than chasing.
I love how you think and imagine in metaphor, because that's the way my mind works. And you described this whole thing to me the first time we had met, and I think it was over a phone call. I don't remember if it was on the phone or the Zoom, but you described the river and the strive, drive, arrive, dive to me, and it just hit. And I, part of the reason it hit so hard is I remember an experience when I had decided I wanted to do my first half Ironman triathlon. And I bought a bike, and I had been a runner before. And so I trained for many months preparing for this event. And when I had the reward and I arrived and I crossed that finish line, I was ecstatic. I bawl my eyes out every time I cross the finish line in anything I do. But then the next day I was diving, and I was in a deep depressive funk because I had arrived and now I was diving. because I created a finish line. Literally, I had a finish line, and I learned from that lesson that a destination cannot be the finish line. I cannot see my life as arriving. And I've used that metaphor in my life over and over. Now, I didn't say it as eloquently as you, but I've applied that same metaphor to say, no, milestones are important along the way, achievements and milestones along the way, but that's not the destination.
Yeah, just think about what that does for your body. In other words, I made the decision that there's going to be no finish lines in my life. I don't know when God's going to call me home. Okay. I just don't want it to be my fault. I mean, you see, I just want to be in motion, in motion as we continue to go on. I think if you always have something bigger to aspire to, and here's a challenge. I mean, in today's world, there are no straight lines in the universe. And, I think one of the things about having that entrepreneurial mindset is that mindset is one where we're always looking into the future. And, so you may say, look at that island. And the people around you may not be able to see it, but you see it. You see this vision of the future, and you say, okay, I see that island. And you can describe it to them. Look at that island. It's beautiful. It's green flora. Look at the palm trees. Can you see the coconuts up there? Look at the water around there. It's clear. The waves are lapping on the shore and the beautiful white sand. Can you see it? Come on, let's go. Let's go. I've got this canoe I built. Here's an oar. Here's how you work it. Jump in here. Okay. And maybe it's even with your family. Running a business. It doesn't matter. But having that vision to get there will sustain you through just about anything. So now I'm in motion. And so we're out there and we're all rowing in unison. And they're imagining. If they can't see it, they're starting to imagine it. They're starting to believe. And then a hurricane comes along, wipes the island out. Now what do? Wait a minute, you sold that destination. You've sold that destination and it's gone. So perhaps some people are going to jump out of the boat. Some people just stop rowing. So as when you're in motion and you start focusing on what are those things or qualities or characteristics or destinations milestones, stepping stones that you can have that build that have no destination. So no matter what, if the hurricane wipes the island out, in that moment, you're a better person. In that moment, you've got something that you're aspiring for, that there is no destination. And that destination, that island is just a milestone. So what are those qualities or characteristics of those things that we can focus in on, have no destination? So I've really thought about that. And I thought, wait a second, character. If I can get myself, my family, to focus in on those things we value most, the character, our health, our family, our values, our unique abilities, the talents, if we can get them to focus in on those things, then there's no destination. And if a hurricane wipes it out, we're trying to have greater character, we'll stay in motion. What about competencies? Competence. If we focus on competence, we're going to become a better rower. We can be able to do this. We can be able to be a better navigator. We use the stars. We use this kind of a thing to get there. If I can increase competence, then we just will keep right on rowing because we know the next island's going to show up. The next milestone is going to show up. And we may cruise through there and drink some of the coconut water and have fun, but then we can't stand it. We're going to see the next one. What's another thing? Compassion. There's no destinations in compassion. So what if you focus in on compassion? Say, what are the things that I can do to show more compassion for others? See, a bigger future, if it does not involve others, is not a true future. It's a future with a destination unless it involves others. So when you start to look at that, your destinations, if it involves others, then you can grow. And then fourth thing is connections. If I'm increasing my connections, strengthening my connection, elevating the connections that I have so that I'm continuing growing and striving, becoming better. So if I focus on character, competence, compassion, and connections, the island gets wiped out. We're still in motion because there's no destination. That was just going to be a milestone. We'll find the next milestone because we're now stronger. We're rowing. We're making things happen. We're in motion and it happens.
The journey is the goal, not the destination.
Exactly. Yeah.
So something that I notice about the way that you speak, and it seems very deliberate, where you take a very small word or a very small change to your manner of speech, your manner of speaking, to change the whole meaning and everything. You've already done it in this conversation. Once deliberately you exposed it, once you didn't explain it. So I'm gonna ask you about this. When you said even better, you said I'm gonna add a 4-letter word to change what I'm describing. It's very intentional speech. Even better, so that you're not implying that you weren't good to begin with. Well, another thing you said when you talked about the importance of gratitude, you said we need to live in gratitude. Talk to me about that.
Well, I could talk to you for a long time about that, So I break gratitude down into 4 different stages. Okay. And we all travel in all of them. The lowest stage of all would be ungratefulness. Okay. Or ingratitude, if you want to call it that. As long as it's one word, the ungratefulness.
Yeah, difference between
And so ungratefulness
gratitude and
versus
ingratitude.
ingratitude. Yeah, right. Exactly. So look, I have a definition for gratitude unexpressed is ingratitude perceived.
Interesting.
Gratitude unexpressed is ingratitude perceived. So I don't think that any of your listeners or viewers would consider themselves to be ungrateful. I think, most people don't say I'm ungrateful and I'm proud of it. It's something that we aspire towards becoming is somebody that's known as somebody that's grateful. However, gratitude unexpressed is ingratitude perceived. And we move through life without really seeing the things that we're grateful for. We're not really. And so it may be people, maybe something that happens, and so other people may think that you're ungrateful just because you didn't express it, make a vocal. And then in addition to that, imagine starting each day asking yourself, who can I see today that I wouldn't normally see, that I could express gratitude to today? That changes your life. So it is, how do we move out of that perceived ingratitude space when we're moving so fast where we're thinking about nothing but ourselves? And how do you move past that? And I can tell you, I try to ask myself a question every day, an empowering question. So it programs my subconscious mind to start looking for things that I wouldn't normally see. One morning I woke up, I said, who can I see today that I wouldn't normally see that I could say thank you to? And a place that I've been going for 25 years, once a month. And I walked into the restroom there and I saw this big, tall a guy working in there and he's cleaning the restroom. And I said, are you responsible for this? And he goes, yeah. I think he thought I was going to say, well, and I said, yeah. I said, you could eat off the floor in here. It's beautiful. People come from around the world just to come here for education and come here and do things. And they go back around the world. If they came in here and had a bad experience, it would affect their learning. And in some small way, thank you for doing this because you're blessing people around the world. And he kind of teared up. And I went back into the room with people that have been coming for the last 4 or 5 years to the same place every quarter. And I asked them, can you tell me what the janitor looks like here? Not one person could tell me. We move at such a pace, we don't see those. So we aren't really ungrateful. We're just so consumed in ourselves and our own thoughts, we don't see what's around us. So that's the lowest level. Okay. The next level would be what we call social gratitude. And social gratitude is what your mom told you. Say, please, thank you. Being able to express social gratitude to others. It's all about respect. And unfortunately, in today's world, for some people, thank you means I'm done with you. They hand you the order, thank you. And it's just kind of like, thank you. It doesn't have that expression. And that's why with our kids, especially, how many times have you heard, tell the man thank you? But get them to express what they're thankful for when they say thank you. Teach them to say, I'm thankful for you taking the time to fix this for me. I'm thank you for thinking of me to do this. Try to teach the kids to add what you're thankful for, because that shows even more respect and it means more to them and it doesn't become meaningless. So that's the second level. The third level is the level of appreciation. This is one where it gets confused oftentimes with a positive attitude. And this is where the risk comes in. I'm grateful for my health as compared to who? I'm grateful for I'm grateful for this food today as compared to what food? We get involved in comparison to generate gratitude, and that can run a risk. Can you be just appreciative without having comparison or expectation? Have you ever done something for somebody and they didn't say thank you? Or they didn't do what you wanted them to do. So you said, well, that's the last time I'm doing something for them.
I'd like to say I've never done that, but I'd be lying to you through my teeth. Right?
Yeah. Well, that's the last time I'm doing it. Well, why'd you do it in the first place? Who were you doing it for in the first place? If you have those feelings, then you were doing it for you. And that's what I call arrows in. So arrows in is where it's all about me. And think about the world that we live in today. Social media. Look at me. You know what I mean? You got this world that we and politicians, look at me. Where is the gratitude? Where is that happening? And then you get the positive people. Give yourself a good mantra. I am strong. I'm incredible. I'm amazing. I'm this kind of thing. As compared to what? And I'm not saying it's bad. it can be good. But at the same time, it's not the same thing as gratitude. It's positive attitude. And there's nothing wrong with a positive. There's a great thing with positive attitude. But gratitude is where you move the arrows out. And so that's the highest level of gratitude. So you have ingratitude, then you have social gratitude, then you have appreciative gratitude, which is all of these are important. We're going to you work up and down them all the time. The highest level is what we call empowering gratitude. So empowered, gratitude that empowers. And this is where you do things without expectation and without comparison. So you actually are just doing it because you are grateful with no expectation, no comparison. It allows you to be grateful in. So, I can give you a couple of quick experiences. I shared this with someone and I got a call from a husband and wife, but she called me and she said, I have to tell you a story. I said, tell me. She said, I pulled into a gas station and I thought, I'm going to do something arrows out for somebody else. And so a car pulled in with a bunch of ladies in it, older ladies, and she went right over to their pump, swiped her card in it. And the lady leans out the window and says, what are you doing? And she said, that's our pump. She said, I know, but if it's okay with you, I'd like to fill your car up with gas. And the lady said, well, we were only going to put $5 in. And she said, well, can I fill it up? And she said, she said, well, it's her birthday. We're on the way to the casino. And can you hurry? So she puts it in, fills it up, goes over and says, thank you so much for allowing me to do this. And she didn't even say, you're welcome. She just drove off. So now Marissa was her name. So Marissa, is like, okay, bless her heart. She didn't have the attitude that I would have had. I would have been those little old biddies, but she was getting ready to call her husband up and say, I had a marvelous experience today. I had the experience of being able to help somebody. She was focused more in what she was doing than she was in what happened. Do you see what I mean? She had the privilege to help somebody. She got the joy out of giving, not the joy of what she expected. But then the car backs up, and I can imagine what happened in the car. Let me finish. The car backs up, and the lady gets out, the driver. She says, it's my mom's birthday, and she wants to say something to you. And she walks over and opens the car, and this lady gets out. She says, it's my 80th birthday. Nobody has ever done anything this nice for me. Can I give you a hug? And so you think about it, had Marissa left with a bad attitude, and I know what happened in the car. The mom said, did she just pay for our gas? You back this car up right now, And if Marissa had been gone, she'd have probably gone to the casino, and maybe she would have bought somebody's lunch at the casino or done something there because ripples would have carried out. And Marissa, had she gone where I might have gone, she'd have gone home and told her husband, that little biddies, that's the last time I'm doing anything like that. And that ripple would have spread out. You see what I mean? And so if we can all practice to be in that highest level of gratitude, and it takes practice. How can I be grateful in no matter what happens, no matter what my circumstances?
Yeah, so grateful in as opposed to grateful for.
Yes.
And how do you practice that? Or how do you practice it, and how do you teach people?
Well, we had a great example, and that was through our son, who, when he was living with cancer, he was never grateful for the cancer, but doggone it if he wasn't grateful in, and he had 3 things that he lived for every day that kind of kept him and drove him. And he had an amazing 4 years and influenced so many people in so many positive ways. And where even when it was toughest for us, he was able to find ways to be grateful in the moment. And one that, he had 3 things that he always said, and one is that be grateful in, no matter what the circumstances are, always have something big to look forward to, and have fun. And those were his 3 things. But it became even more, we all know what's important for us, but do we know what's essential for us? And if we understand what's essential, then things can happen for us, not to us, if you have that kind of a mindset. And that's where it's really, really tough. One time, right after he was interviewed, unbeknownst to us, for a thing that went with PBS that went nationally, and he actually looked into the camera and said, I've never asked why me. I've only asked, what can I do now that I have cancer? And he talked about some of the things that he had done. We went 2 years, and then we went 1 year, and then he went in with very stage 4, very serious cancer, and they had told him that they needed to take out his nose, his eye, and part of his cheek because it was lodged back in his sinuses. And they said, if not, it's a very painful way to die. And so he said no. He just looked at him and said, no, I'm going to get a second opinion. And he went and met with, there's only 2 doctors in the nation that really understood this kind of cancer. And the other one said, whatever you do, don't do it. So here he is in this dilemma. So he told us, he says, we're going to think about this, pray about it. So on Tuesday, he said, I don't want to know what you think, but on Tuesday, come in and we'll talk about it. And so he came in and he said, I'm going to go back to Boston and have them do surgery to clean everything out. And if it's as bad as the other doctor said, then they can go ahead. He came out of that surgery and the doctors came in and said, we couldn't find any cancer. I mean, just a month before, you could see it. You could go up through his sinuses and see it. You could actually go into his eyes and see it. It was gone. Miracle. Well, we went a year that way, and we went in for a regular checkup, and the doctor came in, and you could just tell by his demeanor. He said, Nick, it's back. And we're like, and he said, it's on your pancreas, and it's not in your sinus. It's on your pancreas and in your spleen. Wasn't in his pancreas, but on his pancreas, in his spleen. We need to take out your spleen and do some surgery. You need to come in tomorrow. And he said, he looked at the doctor, said, no. He said, and he looked at me and he says, book that skydiving trip. And he said, I'll come in on the next Monday. This is on a Wednesday. So on a Friday night, we went to San Diego, went to Padres game, 2 of us. We got up the next morning, and it was raining cats and dogs. And I contacted the guy that's a Navy SEAL. And so he took us to SEAL headquarters, and we got to run the obstacle course. And I'm thinking, here I'm looking at this 19-year-old kid running the obstacle course. And, how do you have that disease inside of you? The next day was a Sunday. It happened to be Easter Sunday, and Nick's NIX was the Navy SEAL guy, and he called home to his family because it was going to be a beautiful day, and he got permission, and we called home and got permission. And so on Easter morning, Nick did a double somersault out of the plane with Nick's, hooked up with Nick's. They came down. They did everything you can imagine. And I'm down at the bottom with glasses. I was supposed to go with them, but we didn't because it was Easter and Sunday. We couldn't find somebody to go. But anyway, so I'm down there watching this, and I'm like, pull the chute, pull the chute, pull the chute. And by the last minute, he pulled the chute. It comes down, and Nick comes over with a big grin on his face, and he says, now I'm ready. He found ways to be grateful in. And the other lesson on that is he understood he had the power to say no to the very important. Because was it very important that he get in for that surgery? Yes. But he had the power to say no to the very important because he had a bigger yes burning inside. He knew what was essential. He could say no to the very important because he had his essential. There is a correlation there. There is a correlation there of really understanding this isn't happening to me. This is happening for me.
I love that. You're the second person this week I've interviewed that has described the difference between life happening for you and experiences are for you, not to you. It's a different mindset.
Yeah.
And changing like you do so well, change the smallest word and it changes everything.
Right. Yeah. No question about it.
Okay. Lee, I'm so grateful for your time. And, one of the things I want to be respectful of is that before we end, could you talk to us about the rock?
Okay. Yeah, sure. All right. There's more. I've got, just make sure I carry a rock in my pocket. Okay. So I have for years, and it's not always the same rock. I've got a few other rocks around here, but I make sure that I always have a rock in my pocket. So there was a movie called The Secret, and they asked me what I consider to be the greatest secret in the world. And I said, gratitude. And somehow it got picked up into that movie, and the movie went out. Some like 80 million views or some crazy number, and Oprah touted it. I had no idea I was even in the movie to begin with. And it's kind of a funny story about how I found out. But I told a story there that got dramatized in it, very short. But the real genesis of the rock really happened when one of our daughters was going through a really tough time. And her name is Mariposa.
Butterfly.
That's her nickname. Excuse me. Butterfly. Yeah. And so we called her, that was just her nickname. When she was 12 years old, and she's going through a super, super tough time. And we were putting her into a program. And as I'm standing there with her, and she's crying and she's feeling bad. And I said, sweetheart, you've always been known as Butterfly or Mariposa, and you've known the struggle of the caterpillar. You've known the loneliness of the cocoon. It's time for you to fly. So I asked her, if you go through this program, are you going to be better or worse for going through it? And she said, better, I hope. And I said, by allowing your father to go through this with you, is he going to be better or worse? And she said, well, I hope he's better. So if you're going to be better, I'm going to be better. Let's fly. We get on with it. So that very evening, I was in Southern California, Newport Coast, and I was walking along, feeling sorry for myself, really. I mean, stuff was going on, different things were going on, and not the least of which now challenges there. Picking up a rock and I was throwing it in the water, just whipping it across the water. And I reached down and picked one up. It was almost dark, and I picked it up and looked at it, and it had a perfect emblem of a butterfly on the rock. And literally I dropped to my knees. And I said, I'm done. I am done of feeling sorry for myself. I am done with this. I talked to her about flying like a butterfly. It's time for us to take off. And at that moment, I think is the moment that gratitude became a central focus for me. And I went back and I wrote down what we had said the night before and sent her the rock. And so that rock, we still have it. We have it in safe now because of everything that's happened. As a result of that rock, I've been on airplane. I was on an airplane and a flight attendant comes by and writes me a little piece of note on my napkin and says, thank you, Mr. Brower, for the rock. And I'm like, what? And so she comes by and she smiles and she pulls out a rock. And I'm like, how does this happen? And I can give you story after story after story. She talked about how she and her husband had lost her job, and they saw that, or they read it, one or the other, and how she picked it up and it's saved her life. I've been in Chile and walking through the airport, Lori and I together, and I saw family come together, and I saw them pull out a rock and started laughing and talking. And so then when I saw him by the baggage, I walked over to this young man and I asked him, what was that? He says, oh, that's called a gratitude rock. And I'm like, He says, we carry him as a family. I had a man stop me on the street. I said, you were in the secret? I said, yeah. And he goes, can I tell you a story? I said, yeah. He said, well, exactly 1 year ago today. I said, like today, 1 year ago? He said, yeah, 1 year ago today, my wife passed away. And he said, I was bitter. I just retired. We're off. We had this beautiful future planned and everything was gone. He says, I was shaking my fist at the heavens. I was mad. He said, but then I saw this and heard about it, read about it, however he saw it. And he said, I went out to my wife's garden and I picked up a rock, and he pulls it out and he shows it to me. He said, I decided in that moment I was no longer going to be a victim. I was going to be a victor. And I still remember him saying those words. And I think, I don't know how I'm so blessed to be in that position that how many years ago, 15 years ago now that came out. I've been smuggled into Venezuela to work with the opposition on how to introduce gratitude back in the country. All these different things have happened. And I would say it started from a moment of where I was in ingratitude, ungrateful, that got turned around and has exploded out to where I still get emails. I still get emails to this day from people around the world talking about how different stories of gratitude, how I got blessed with that. Not sure I know. But grateful.
Well, I am grateful for you, Lee, grateful for your time, and I'm sure everybody listening is the same. And one last question, if you could tell somebody struggling, somebody starting this process that just needs that push to get that last piece of motivation to move them on, what would you suggest they do to begin this process of gratitude?
Two things. One, ask yourself a question every day. And a question that I ask frequently is, can I be the answer to somebody's prayer today? And I don't know if I ever have, but at least then your mindset shifts to where you're looking out, not in. Arrows out, what I call arrows out, not arrows in. So if you can ask that question every day, and then find yourself a rock. I mean, there's plenty of them. You don't have to buy them. They're out there. You can buy, there's plenty of rocks. Just get yourself a rock. And when you wake up in the morning, squeeze it. Just get to develop the routine of squeezing it. Stand in front of the mirror when you squeeze it. Look yourself in the eye and say, I love you. God loves you. And then ask the question and walk out the door. Then when you get home at night, take it out of your pocket, squeeze it again, or out of your purse, wherever you may be carrying it. Squeeze it again and say, what one thing can I be grateful for today? So start with by looking yourself in the mirror and saying, I love you. And then God loves you. And then have a great day and smile, because your subconscious mind's been hearing so many your self-talks going the other way. Need to replace some of that. So anyway.
Inspiring words. If that lands on nobody but me, Lee, you've done an amazing job today. So thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you.
I hope someday we can do this again.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
We're grateful for
I
everybody
appreciate it.
listening. We'll talk next time.